দর্শক আরটিভির সাপ্তাহিক আয়োজন ডিপ্লোম্যাটিক জোনে আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি আমি সিফাত শারমিন। প্রতি সপ্তাহে আমরা হাজির হই নতুন নতুন অতিথি নিয়ে, কথা বলি তাদের বিভিন্ন কাজ নিয়ে এবং জানতে চাই তাদের পছন্দ অপছন্দগুলো। আমাদের আজকের অতিথি জয়েন ইউনাইটেড নেশনস প্রোগ্রাম অন HIV AIDS UNAIDS এর বাংলাদেশের কান্ট্রি কোঅর্ডিনেটর লিও কেনি। Very welcome, Mr. Leo Kenny.
Thanks,
to
Sifa.
our show Diplomatic Zone.
Thank you very much.
So how are you today?
Yes, good. Another day and still going.
Okay. Is this your first visit in Bangladesh?
No, in fact, my wife has been here for a couple of years, and I've been commuting from Geneva and New York. So I've been here quite often,
really?
every other month.
Oh, so you are happy to join with your family?
I'm very pleased. I only started work about a month ago, but
she is working on what?
She's working with the Embassy of Sweden. She's the Swedish ambassador here.
Swedish ambassador here. Oh, very good to know that. So in Bangladesh, what type of food do you like most?
Well, I love all, Asian food, but I love Bangladeshi curries and dals and chapati. Sorry, that's Indian actually, isn't it? No, but I love.
No, it's
I love the
rice
curries.
and dal, Bangladeshi food also. Indian, we have some similarities with them as we are a neighbor country. That's why.
And the biryani, I think. Is,
biryani. I heard from most of the foreigners when I go abroad that biryani they like very much.
Well, I like to cook myself, so it's one of my favorite pastimes is cooking.
Okay, that's great. Very good. As far as we know, before Bangladesh, you worked in Kenya, and which is African country, and now you are in Asia. So how do you compare your experience so far between these two countries?
Well, very different. I in fact, have worked in a number of countries in southern Africa, in Namibia and Kenya. But when I was in Kenya, I was actually working mainly on Somalia. So in respect to religion, I guess that there were certain similarities, but that's about where it ends. Bangladesh is very Asian, and I have missed the kind of mysticism of the Asian region for so many years when I was working in Africa.
What is UNAIDS?
In fact, we are a joint program of 11 UN agencies. I won't list them now. Interestingly, UN Women has just become the 11th co-sponsor. And our main aim is to coordinate and really collate the joint efforts of the United Nations system into ensuring that people throughout the world have universal access to prevention and treatment and care and support. And we very strongly underline the important need to maintain the dignity of people, to fight stigma and discrimination, make sure that it's a human rights-based approach, and really to bring together the collective resources of the UN system to support governments and civil society.
So UNAIDS doing what kind of work over here?
Well, here we are working through the UN system to support the implementation of the National AIDS Plan. And, our main aim is to really help the Bangladeshis have a well-capacitated national AIDS program with civil society participation and the participation of people living with HIV. So really it's in providing a sound evidence base and working with other very important partners who are doing this, like ICDDRB and Save the Children. Really making the money work. There's quite a lot of money in this from the Global Fund on AIDS and TB and malaria, plus sector support.
So you were telling that you were here from 5 months. So what's your plan for the next 2 years?
Well, I'm going to be here for 3 years actually.
Okay.
So in terms, professionally you mean, in terms of the work that we're doing, it's really working very closely with the National AIDS and STD prevention program under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. You know, I think it's really bringing together all of the UN agencies in support of ensuring that they have the capacities to provide country leadership, that it's a sustainable response. But we also really work hard to ensure that the resources for the response in Bangladesh are brought to bear in really halting the epidemic, which is the Millennium Development Goal.
Okay, so UNAIDS spend nearly $100 million through different organizations, and our NGOs need to be more transparent and obligated to people and donor. So what do you say about this?
Well, first thing I'd say, Sifat, is I wish UNAIDS had $100 million, but we don't, in fact.
Oh.
I think there's $100 million which is being spent in the AIDS response in Bangladesh over the next 3 to 5 years.
Sure. Okay.
But as I said, I think the UN's role is to help with the evidence base and building capacities through technical support and just helping civil society and the government work together. Ours is a supportive role.
Now let's talk about HIV/AIDS. Though the prevalence of injecting drug users or men's sex with men and transgender varies, at present prevalence of HIV/AIDS is less than 0.1% in general population. So in Bangladesh, what's your opinion?
Yes, well, you know, in the general population it seems like a small epidemic, 0.1%. But in fact, in the most at-risk populations, it's significantly higher. And, you know, I think that it's important to note that once this epidemic gets outside of these most at-risk populations, and we're talking about transgender and hijra and injecting drug users and sex workers, male and female, then there's a real potential for this epidemic to spread very quickly. There's one other very important group too that I think we should be thinking about. You know, last year, over half of the infections were amongst returning male migrant workers. And I think that that's very important to bear in mind, and the government and other civil society partners are working hard to address that at the moment.
You were talking about the migrant people. So what we should do about the migrant people?
The most important thing is not to stigmatize people who go overseas for work and come back. It's a very simple solution, and I think that the government of Bangladesh has already started to address this. It's really important to get to these people before they go and to get to them when they come back. So to educate them before they go, so that there's prevention programs in place. But there are also situations where, particularly in the Middle East, a lot of women are particularly vulnerable to sexual violence, and that increases their risk of contracting HIV. But if those simple measures can be put in place, I say simple, it's quite a logistic nightmare. But I think that the government is embarking upon that kind of strategic approach now.
Here, one point we should notice that a National AIDS Committee, NSE. So what role should play the NSE?
The National AIDS and STD program is doing a good job. I think that, again, that the United Nations system can help to build their capacities to make sure that they can provide the sustainable leadership that's required for the AIDS response. At the moment, I think over half of the money is being provided from the Global Fund on AIDS, TB and Malaria. And, I think that the government of Bangladesh is providing a tremendous support through the sector support, but that, again, is donor funded. So in the long term, UNAIDS' role is to help governments to provide a sustainable set of capacities and sustainable resources for making sure we roll back this epidemic.
Do you think that they're in right way?
I think they're embarking on the right direction. I think there's some need for longer-term capacities, but I think that's really, that's something that the international community is trying to help the government right across the board do, not just in this particular ministry. But they should take credit, I think, the government of Bangladesh for keeping this epidemic below 1% by starting very important targeted interventions for the most at-risk population. So I think the government of Bangladesh deserves great credit for doing that and involving civil society and involving people living with the disease.
So how UNAIDS working with a National Aid Committee, so do they have any linkage or not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're in almost daily contact. It's not just UNAIDS, it's all of the UN agencies who are working on HIV and AIDS. And we're in daily contact in terms of helping to provide technical support, in terms of reporting on the epidemic, providing the evidence base. And I think, UNAIDS' role is to try to convene all of the partners around supporting the National AIDS Program so that it is, as I say, a sustainable response.
Okay, we will talk more, but we have to take a short break, then we will come back again.
Okay, good.
Okay. ডিপ্লোম্যাটিক জোনের এই পর্যায়ে নিচ্ছি বিরতি, ফিরছি একটু পরেই, সে পর্যন্ত আমাদের সঙ্গেই থাকুন। আবারও আমন্ত্রণ ডিপ্লোম্যাটিক জোন অনুষ্ঠানে। কথা বলছিলাম জয়েন্ট ইউনাইটেড নেশনস প্রোগ্রাম অন HIV এইডস UNAIDS এর বাংলাদেশের কান্ট্রি কোঅর্ডিনেটর লিও কেনিয়ার সঙ্গে। Welcome again.
Thank you very much.
So now let's talk about your family members. So can you tell us something about your family members, your kids and wife, what they're doing?
Well, my wife is, as I say, the Swedish ambassador here. Okay. I've got 3 kids, and 2 of them are at the international school.
American International.
That's right. They've been here for a couple of years. They're twin girls.
Twin girls.
They're 18 years old.
Okay. Another one?
And my son, he's 22, and he's taken some time off university in Australia to join us here. Okay. And he's actually working in Cox's Bazar as an intern with UNHCR.
Oh, okay.
So he's working in the refugee camps there for no money, and I think it's very good for him as a young person to do that.
That's great for him. That's really great. Okay, now let's talk about some professional issue which you were working on. According to the 2011 Serological Surveillance of Bangladesh, the HIV prevalence among the female sex worker, men sex with men and women, and hijras was 0.7%. So what is your opinion about here?
Yes, we talk here about a concentrated epidemic amongst most at-risk populations, and there is, although the prevalence in the general population seems to be very low at 0.1%, it's much higher amongst these groups of particularly sex workers and injecting drug users. It's quite high amongst the transgender hijra population as well. So, once it gets outside of this most at-risk group, it has the potential to really spread very quickly.
We are taking prevention, so why this number is increasing day by day?
Well, in fact, in the last serological survey that was done by ICDDRB and ICDER, there was some slight decline amongst the most at-risk groups. Having said that, it wasn't a significant decline. For example, amongst injecting drug users some years ago, they found HIV in around 11%, which is an alarming number of people. Now, that was a reasonably small sample. Over the years, it seems to have come down to about 7%, and last year in 2011 in Dhaka, we're talking about, it seems to have been reduced to around 5 and a bit percent. But having said that, because it was a small group, it's not statistically significant, and we need to keep a very close watch on the most at-risk populations.
So how UNAIDS can play a role with media so that no negative reports are published against the sexual minorities?
I think the mass media is tremendously important. This kind of program that RTV is doing is very much appreciated. You're playing a role in preventing, really preventing the singling out of most at-risk populations. I think that we've seen everywhere in the world that when societies can discuss openly about what creates risk, which is an erosion of human rights of people, then we see that that is fuel. There's fuel to the epidemic if that's not done. So I think the mass media has a tremendous role to play, not just television, but radio and the mass media. I think in my short time here that I've been very impressed with the way that mass media has played a role in the AIDS response.
Have you any specific mass media program on this?
There are several. We don't, as UNAIDS specifically, although we maintain close liaison with the media. But certainly the government, through its sector support and the work that is done by the Global Fund on AIDS, TB and Malaria, through the sub-recipients and the NGOs, a lot of work is being done to sensitise journalists, train them on how to report effectively, non-stigmatise, ways of reporting and what have you. So, I think there's been a good effort on that. There's also, great room for further work.
According to Bangladesh Health Bulletin, around 64% people are using a mobile phone. So, have you any plan to create awareness using this software?
Just recently we've been talking to a number of people about more use of mobile phones. I mean, Grameen, I think in terms of its, corporate social responsibility program should look more carefully at this. There's great potential and very good examples from all over the world of how mobile phones have been used, not just to do prevention, but I know that the Institute for Disease Research Control is actually having some mobile phone and internet procedures where it helps them to do surveillance and reporting. So yes, there's great potential in that.
So now let's talk about the policy. So what policy we should take to create the awareness?
I think the government actually has quite a facilitative policies and set of policies and legislation. So I think that's heading in the right direction. It's really getting traction on those policies. One example I'll give you is that young people's knowledge of HIV is still very low.
So here I can say one thing, that do you think that textbook should include about this?
Absolutely, and I mean there are a number of programs by the government and civil society where they are trying to systematically include HIV education and life skills-based education in schools. Yeah. Having said that, I think there's a great need to scale up those efforts because young people's knowledge still remains, relatively low. I shouldn't quote off the top of my head, but I think that when young people were surveyed last in being asked to give 3 ways to protect themselves from contracting HIV, very low and unacceptably low percentages of young people between 15 and 24 could do that. So much more effort needs to be made in this regard.
So what do you think, that young people can play a role over here or not?
Oh, look, young people are really the key to preventing this epidemic from exploding. You know, the UN agencies, UNFPA and UNICEF and all of the co-sponsors, in fact, you know, are working very hard trying to build capacities of young people and ensuring that they can participate effectively in the response. We've seen right throughout the world that where epidemics are coming down, young people have played a critical role in that. I should mention too that in the Southeast Asian Pacific region, there are only 2 countries in the global report last year where the epidemic is not coming down and where it's actually increasing. One of them is the Philippines, and Bangladesh is the other one.
We are at the end of the program. So lastly, I want to ask you that where you want to see Bangladesh in next 10 years?
I think by 2015, globally, Bangladesh has committed as a government with over 65 countries last year in the UN General Assembly, and they committed to trying to get towards 0 new infections and 0 AIDS-related deaths and 0 discrimination.
Okay, hope we will do that by 2015. Thank you very much, Mr. Leo. We are end of the program. Thank you for giving your valuable time for us for this program.
Hope
to see you again.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. দর্শক, শেষ করছি আজকের ডিপ্লোম্যাটিক জোন। আগামীতে আবার দেখা হবে নতুন কোনো অতিথির সঙ্গে। সে পর্যন্ত সবাই ভালো থাকুন, সুস্থ থাকুন। ধন্যবাদ সবাইকে।